Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Major Applications Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Ed Lowy, the Committee Chairman. I'm going to do the usual admin before we start. I understand there are no apologies for absence. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming for tonight's meeting? No, thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting 20th of February are attached to Agenda A. Can I take those as agreed? Thank you. The matters we're taking tonight are the matters published, items 6 to 9, of which the first one is a petition item. They're all in public, there are no part 2s. So, simple and straightforward. Okay, let me just explain how this evening works. I say we have one petition item, the rest are non-petition. All items receive a presentation from officers which supplements the report that's been published. It will go up on the screen. Apologies, we believe our technology is robust tonight, but we did have some issues last night with it. We are hopeful for tonight. Officers will explain where there is a petition, petitioners, and I'm combining the petitions on the COMAG site because they effectively are raising the same issues. There's no difference in the issues they're raising. Get 5 minutes to address us, please. You get 4 minutes green, a minute on the amber, and we get to red. I will stop. Members have the right to ask questions of a petitioner. They may not, but they may seek some clarification. If any new planning issues arise as a result of a petition, I will ensure those are raised with officers at the end and not take it out at the speaking time. The applicant is then entitled to address us for 5 minutes. Same rules apply to them. And I'm aware that Councillor Ahmed is intending to speak as a ward councillor in respect of item 6. Quick, the usual health and safety stuff, no fire alarms are expected, so if it goes, we're assuming it's real. Fire exits, the best one's the way you came in, and through the next door and down the spiral staircase. There is also an exit in the corner behind me. Can I please ask that all mobile phones are switched off or at least to silent? There are residents' feedback forms, the orange forms I can see on the chairs in front of you, and Demographic Services would love to get some of those back. Could I also ask, I presume most people have an interest in item 6. We do have 3 others to consider after that, so when that item is done, if you could leave as quietly as possible so committee can proceed, because we have another committee to do after this one. The voting members of committee tonight, starting down on my far right, I have Councillor Stead, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Edwards. On my left, I have Councillor Oswald, Councillor Dillon and Councillor Duncan. I only get a vote if they manage to get a tie. If they don't, I do not vote. The officer team tonight, Peter Loveday is doing highways. Mandip Malhotra, the major applications manager, is presenting. James Roger, the head of planning, officers' advice as required. Anisha Teji is our clerk from Democratic Services, and Roisin Hogan is the planning lawyer tonight. I think that's everybody. So I'm going to go straight, please, to item 6, COMAG, Tavistock Road, Useley. I would advise everybody that a site visit was undertaken by members last Friday. This is also a very similar scheme to this, although it's a reduced version of, was presented to this committee in December. So members are reasonably familiar with it. The only bit I didn't remind everybody is that we are live on the Council's YouTube site. So if I could ask all speakers, please speak clearly into your microphones. Those of you who are in the audience are not visible, but you are visible when you are seated at the table speaking to us. And your comments will also be in the YouTube. Apart from that, mind it when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The application before us is the COMAG site on Tavistock Road. On the applications on the screen before you, it's the area outlined. It should be read. The application is for the demolition of the existing warehouse and the erection of 104 self-contained residential units alongside car parking, landscaping, etc. This is the existing site location plan, and for clarification, apologies, there is a plan which shows it overlaid with the, it's not here, apologies. The application proposes a Part 3, Part 4 and Part 7 storey building. So if we take you through the scheme, the application is a revised submission of a scheme that was refused at Planning Committee on the 19th of December last year. Now the reason for refusal that members proposed and the reason the application was refused was as follows. The proposed development, by reason of its height, bulk, mass and design, represents an overdevelopment of the site that would fail to harmonise with the street scene on Winnock Road and have adverse impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. It's not normal to repeat the reason for refusal, but I just wanted to focus our minds on what we're actually considering through the revised submission that we have before us today. So as I take you through the plans, as I mentioned, that's the existing site here, and the majority of this block is 2 stories in height. So the area along the front is actually car parking, and the main built form is the area in grey. This is the proposed location plan, which shows at ground floor level townhouse style development along here, wrapping round the corner into flatted development. So it starts off at 3 stories, increases to 4 on the corner, and goes round to a 7-storey building. At basement level there will be a car park, and then at ground floor level there will be further parking, which is accessed from Tavistock Road here, and if we go on to the first floor plan, there is a full deck of amenity space provided at podium level. Some of you may remember the Padcroft scheme, which is marked here. The proposal in this application would actually link the 2 areas of amenity space. So although this is the application amenity space serving this development, because they're being put forward or built by the same developer, it would actually be a much larger amenity area there. If we move on, at first floor level there is a separation distance of 2.7 metres between the existing property at Winnock Road and the proposed development. We go up and it's set in further at second floor level. The distance increases here, and again at third floor level it's actually set back and set in. And if we take you through to the elevations on that corner, you'll see how the elevation has changed here. There are some comparison slides, but I'll take you through the proposals first. So this is the proposed elevation along Winnock Road, so where it adjoins the 2-storey properties, and the Tavistock Road elevation. And in the background, the slightly grey development, that's actually the Padcroft development for context. For information, along this elevation, the application has been reduced in height by a storey. The corner block, which was the concern primarily at the last committee meeting, has also been brought down in height by a storey. And then the actual design of this has changed to a more traditional format, and you'll see that from the comparison slides later. These are some of the elevations and sections through the application site, so it clearly shows that there's a basement level of car parking, and then in this image it's clearer to see there's also a podium level of parking with amenity space above. More elevations, and these are some of the existing sections for context set against those proposed that we've just seen. This is a more detailed plan of the landscaping. Now this shows Padcroft Works, which already is under construction and has been consented, alongside the proposal at Comag. So, as I mentioned earlier, the amenity space is being joined together in this area to provide a larger space, but the application you're considering is to provide amenity space here, and yes, it's at first floor level, and there is a setback of actual usable space here to ensure that the amenity of the residents at Winnock Road is safeguarded. This would also be used for the children's play space, which is serving this development, but also later serve the wider scheme. These are some of the existing photos. I am sorry that the quality of the photos is not overly clear. So you can see that the proposal is under construction. I think most members did see it at when we went on site on Friday. That, I believe, is Winnock Road. This is the existing tree on the corner of the property, and you can see Comag is quite far back, set into the street, and that's the area of car parking. So that would be Winnock Road along here, and where the photo is taken from Tavistock Road. the existing tree at the junction of the properties. So this is number 2 Winnock Road, and that's how far you can tell that there's a fair separation distance to the 2-storey element of COMAG, which is set quite far back here, and that's the relationship of the 2-storey proposal against 2 Winnock Road. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them, but we were trying to clarify some of the measurements for you. So the separation distance between the existing COMAG property and the back of 2 Winnock Road, so the 2-storey element of number 2, is 15.75 metres, and that doesn't change, albeit the proposed development would only be 1 storey in height in this area, so at the point where it reaches that development. The existing gap between the fenced boundary of the car park is 1 metre, so that would be increased to 2.75 alongside the proposed development. There are some, again, the relationships at ground floor level. So here we've tried to provide a comparison of the previously refused scheme. So there were design concerns by members raised about the treatment of this being not consistent with the Winnock Road properties. So the proposed development goes much further in trying to provide an integration between the old and the new going around the corner. We go through to Tavistock Road. This is the previously refused scheme, and this is the proposed development. So I appreciate that the scales aren't overly clear here, but that has been reduced from 5 to 4 stories on the corner. These are some of the proposed images sent through via by the applicants of the proposed scheme on Tavistock Road. I know that CGIs aren't something we seek to rely on, especially because we can choose to alter the materials through conditions phases, but it's useful for context in light of the existing properties in the area. I also wanted to note that the daylight and sunlight of all of the properties along Winnock Road has been considered, and there isn't a significant impact, primarily because this existing 2-storey built form will actually be reduced to ground level, so will be reduced to 1 storey. That's where the podium deck will be of car parking with amenity space above, and the built form moves more into alignment with the existing houses on Winnock Road. Sorry. Take you back to... The application before us remains as a scheme that provides 35% policy compliant affordable housing, which is supported. In all other respects, the application is deemed to be acceptable in accordance with the conditions that are proposed, and also the Section 106 contribution that has been put forward. The car parking ratio remains as previously proposed at a 1-to-1 ratio. The proposal is considered to overcome the reason for refusal issued in December 2017 and is considered to be a sustainable development in accordance with planning policies. Thank you, Chair.
I would also draw members' attention to the addendum, which features a strengthening to a number of conditions.
It does. The addendum is trying to tidy up some of the issues that we've found. I would just note as a verbal update, we have proposed an affordable housing review mechanism on page 2 of the addendum. Because this application is providing a policy compliance scheme, that isn't actually necessary. So by way of verbal update, as long as you're happy, I think it would be something we'd revise prior to issuing a decision. So apologies for that error. We have received a letter of support from the Hillingdon Canals Partnership, but we have also received 2 petitions with in excess of 400 signatures against the application. All other elements are tidying up of conditions, strengthening them in the most. Thank you.
Okay. Could I just ask the Head of Planning to comment on condition 14, the secure by design? I think that's relevant.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the Council has a standard condition that relates to secure by design. So this is effectively ensuring that all development is designed so it minimises risk of crime. We have very recently been liaising with the Met Police as to whether there's anything we can do to the condition to strengthen it. And what members are seeing in the addendum is a strengthened version of our normal secure by design condition that the Met Police would encourage us to impose on large development sites. So I appreciate it's a slightly different wording from what you may have seen before, but I would assure committee that what you're actually seeing is a stronger version of our secure by design condition, which I hope members will welcome in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, James. Okay, I'll move now to the petitions, please. Who's speaking on behalf of the petitioners? You okay? As long as you're aware there's 5 between you, then I'm fine with that. Could you just state your name as you start? You want to come forward and sit there as well? Yeah, makes life easier. You can swap between you then. If you just state your name before you start, just so that we've got that for the file. Right. When you're ready.
My name is Jean Dixon. I'm a Useley resident living 2 streets away from the proposed development. I'm speaking on behalf of the 70 or so residents in Useley who signed the petition, and I'm going to be really brief so Alan has got a chance to speak. You already know how strongly we object to this tower block development of luxury flats. It is totally out of character. We want bungalows and affordable houses with gardens, not balconies and views over the neighbourhood. Usually people have been shocked at how rapidly high-density blocks of flats have been built up over the past few years, with only vague promises of investment in the infrastructure, schools, surgeries and safe play spaces at some unspecified time in the future. In the meantime, we're still suffering from traffic gridlock under the railway bridge with a junction of Tavistock Road, not to mention chokingly polluted air. This has to be taken in the round with other plans for the old coal yard site opposite, for example, as a civic amenity site and trade waste transfer station. We want to know, are you people serious? Local people have been dismayed to see how the current development of a tower block on the Red Rose site, and now, if a second tower block is built next door, we feel it is adding insult to injury, showing us local residents just what you think of us with a 2-finger salute. It is high time the council showed it was for the voters and ratepayers of Useley and West Drayton and not for the property developers and purchasers of luxury flats. Just remember, please, that this is part of the old Column Wharf, not Canary Wharf. Thank you.
I'll go straight on. Good evening, Chair and other committee members. I am Alan Atkinson. I'm speaking on behalf of 375 frustrated local residents who have signed the petition. There's 2 petitions. The latest planning application is only 7 dwellings smaller than the first application, which was refused. The latest one is still grossly overdeveloped for its bulk and height, and overlooking existing housing. It is far too high for the street scene. The traffic that it will produce into Tavistock Road will only exacerbate the already gridlocked roads around the site. I assume that the Padcroft site was only passed because it was immediately off the high street. The Comag site is not the same. It is directly next to 2-storey Victorian Edwardian villas, and then into a housing estate of 2-storey family housing with front and back gardens, which apartments will look directly in and onto. The residents of Useley and West Drayton are already experiencing a great amount of antisocial behaviour, including knife and drug crimes, caused by the densely populated, overdeveloped sites. The old RAF camp in Porter's Way is an example of how it is changing, how the residents of West Drayton having to change their way of life to live. Do not allow another one to be formed here. There is no infrastructure to support this type of development, i.e. doctors, schools, hospital capacity, roads, etc. This type of high-rise and density is going back to the 1960s, which is the slums they're trying to demolish today in other boroughs. We need proper council homes. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Do members have any questions? No? Thank you very much. Anyone here on behalf of the applicant for this one? Again, if you just state your name as you start, so we've got it for the file.
Good evening. My name is Nick Alston. I'm a Planning Director at GVA and the applicant's Planning Advisor. I've been asked to say a few words this evening in support of the application. Now, much of what I was going to say has been covered in quite a bit of detail by your officers already, so I won't repeat that. However, I would like to draw your attention to a number of key points relating to scale, bulk and massing, affordable housing, parking, highways and amenity. Now, since the previous application was refused at the end of last year, Redrow has worked very closely with your officers to respond positively to the reasons for refusal. We've listened, Redrow has listened and actively responded to the concerns in the resubmitted application. And your officers have pushed us to provide significant changes and additional supporting and technical information in order to robustly assess the scheme. Redrow has also sought to maintain active dialogue with the local community. Now, the revised scheme has reduced the overall height, bulk and massing so that proposed development is now smaller in scale than the adjacent Padcroft work scheme. This includes a reduction from 8 to 6/7 stories on Tavistock Road, and a reduction in height on the corner of Tavistock and Winnick Road from 5 to 4 stories. Furthermore, there's been a complete redesign of the elevation fronting Winnick Road. This has been undertaken in response to the comments received, so that it now features traditional pitched roofs, reflecting the neighbouring properties. This design maintains a 3-storey frontage onto Winnick Road. Now, we must remember that this is a town centre site within 100 or so metres of a Crossrail station, and we are all obliged to optimise the potential of sites such as this. Now, as per your officers' report, officers agree that these amendments have provided a welcome improvement to the townscape setting in this location and set a benchmark for high-quality design expected for new developments in Hillingdon. In terms of affordable housing, one of the recent speakers mentioned the need for affordable housing in the borough. The scheme is providing 35% affordable housing. This includes family-sized accommodation spread across 36 new, desperately needed affordable homes. In terms of parking is provided at a ratio of 1:1 alongside electronic charging points, accessible parking bays and lockable motorcycle bays. In terms of highways, the scheme will result in a net reduction in vehicle trips compared to the existing use on the site, and testing has confirmed that the surrounding junctions have capacity to accommodate traffic demand at peak times. In terms of amenity, all new homes will be orientated to exceed the 21-metre separation distance for direct facing habitable rooms. Balconies include an obscured treatment to maintain privacy, and the boundary of the 7th floor roof terrace is set back to avoid overlooking. There are no unacceptably adverse impacts on neighbour privacy or amenity in terms of daylight and sunlight. And all neighbouring amenity spaces continue to pass the overshadowing test with improvements as a result of the scheme for some of the existing neighbours. And as the officer's report confirms, there will be no unacceptable loss of light, outlook, privacy or overlooking. Just to conclude, I'd like to summarise the planning case for the development. First of all, it involves the reuse of a redundant, previously developed site in a highly sustainable location. It is of a high quality design that responds fully to the previous reasons for refusal. It delivers significant public benefits, including 35% affordable housing and significant SIL, Section 106 and New Homes bonus to address the social infrastructure matters just raised. It is in full accordance with the development plan. And finally, your officers have recommended the application for approval, and we urge you to follow this advice and approve this application this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that. I noticed you made a point of saying that you felt this complied with all the sunlighting and that residents would not be impacted adversely by this. I've got another question which I will ask officers later. But if we look at 2 Winnock Road...
Yeah. Can I see where
Yes. If we look here at 2 Winnock Road, on the first floor they have a bedroom window very close here, which goes up ground, first, second, because this is the third,
right, steps in.
but it doesn't comply here. So it does adversely affect that.
The question is whether or not it's a significant adverse effect.
Otherwise you lose it on the public video.
That's fine. The question being raised is there's a proposed development which is 2 stories and then setbacks up to 3, adjacent to existing 2-storey development, and whether or not that would have a significant adverse effect on daylight and sunlight to the upstairs, I think it's a bedroom is the window that you're referring to, to the rear of the property. Now that's part of the site where we've got existing development comes very close up to the boundary, and while there may be some changes, there is tests on whether or not that will lead to a significant adverse effect. There may be changes, but that room will still maintain what is considered in planning terms an adequate level of daylight and sunlight.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you referred to it as 2-storey, but in fact it's actually 4-storey.
It's part of the site where it steps through. If we could have an elevation, Mandip. So there we go. It's where it's stepping through. So you can almost see there's almost like a 45-degree angle of the roof pitch.
Can I just ask one question of my own, if I might? The applicant you're representing has appealed our previous refusal decision. Are they going to withdraw that appeal if they're granted consent tonight on this?
My understanding is that is their intention.
Thank you for that. Councillor Abdulwalana, please. I'll let him run. A little. Thank you.
Good evening, committee. Chairman, I'm not going to repeat what I wrote to you in the previous meeting, all the objections raised by the residents. Having been involved in discussions with Redrow for and on behalf of the residents regarding the application concerning the COMEX site and being made aware of the proposed amendments by Redrow to appease the objectors to the proposed development. I can see that in the amended plan, GBA, who are representing Redrow, have made changes which I summarize here. 3 stories fronting Winnock Road, setback 4th story, not visible from the street level. Redesigned to appropriately respond to the existing terraced houses. This elevation now features traditional pitched roofs to reflect the neighbouring properties. 4 stories on corner, reduced from 5 stories, 6 stories on step from the corner to Tavistock Road West, and 7 stories along the remainder of Tavistock Road East, reduced from 8 stories. The footprint of the existing COMEC building, which has been acceptable since it was built, from that time as it is receded from the boundary. I would hope that Redrow can agree to reduce the footprint of this current application to match that of the existing COMEC building while keeping the height of 3 stories in Winnock Road, as I mentioned in the summary above. The surrounding road network, which all are aware, is constantly overloaded at various times of the day. Perhaps more dialogue is needed with TfL regarding regulating it further. My main concern overall has to be the impact any new build has on existing residents, and I feel that unless this is minimized to the levels I have mentioned above, then this resubmitted application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody got any questions? No? Thank you very much indeed. concludes presentations. So there are no outstanding questions I've got, so we'll open for debate. Councillor Higgins, do you want to start me off?
Yeah, I've just been studying that drawing. Very nice. Obviously they're using the old trick of colouring in and making it look, and the bulk is the same, isn't it? I mean, the one at the above, I mean, they've tried to make it, have they reduced that down? I'm not sure about it, because it still looks like the same height as the adjoining development that we've already agreed.
Sorry, which bit are we looking at, Councillor?
The roof height at the back.
At the back?
Yeah, that.
No, the back hasn't.
That hasn't gone down, but it looks smaller on that one for some reason.
It has gone down? It has gone down.
It's gone down a level.
Just to clarify, at the back of the site, a storey has been taken off, such that the scheme you refused was higher than Packcroft in the background.
So
it's now not higher than Packcroft in the background, and the importance of that is if we were hypothetically in an appeal situation, the one advantage of the previous refusal was that you were arguing that the developer had gone taller than the previous Packcroft.
Yeah, exactly.
So then the existing Packcroft, you're now it is not taller, which is quite a significant point because it would have relevance in the appeal situation.
The reason I'm asking that because it is a significant point. I mean, we refused it on certain issues last time, and it seems that all those issues that we did refuse it on have been addressed. Is that correct?
That is what the officer report is
saying. There was
saying.
a point I just wished to add, because Mandy didn't mention it in her presentation. When we did the site visit, if you look at the wider area, yes, the whole of Winnock Road is two-storey. Once you reach the other end of Winnock Road, there's actually further flats that are 3- and 4-storey. So the overall character of the area is varied. I know the petitioners were giving a perspective that you're integrating with a two-storey street, but the wider area is very mixed in its architectural form, use of materials, etc. So what the terrace on Winnock Road is trying to do is not trying to replicate the existing very low eaves and ridge height of the cottages on Winnock Road. It's just trying to do something that's less of a blockish, flatted appearance, hence the townhouse appearance on Winnock Road, which, as I say, is not replicating those cottages. It's just doing a much better transition between the larger, flatted part of the development, which of course is integrating with the Packcroft development that exists, or rather is currently being built to the rear of the site.
Councillor Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I found the site visit most useful the other day, and it's always good to see these things on the ground, as it were. And I do appreciate that the developers have gone some way to addressing very real concerns in the area, and that is appreciated. I still have remaining concerns, though, about this. One, the tree on the corner, which is not shown accurately on the submitted plans. They look like a couple of rose bushes. In fact, it's quite a large tree.
Could I draw your attention to the addendum in respect to the tree? You may find your concerns been allayed.
Oh, right.
It's on the third page, Jenny.
Third page. It is a long way in it.
All right.
There is the short version of it. There is some doubt as to whether that tree can be retained. The opinion of the tree officer is we thought it was extremely nice on site. Their opinion is somewhat different to that. They're not sure about its value, but the commitment is if that has to come out, that a substantial tree has to go back.
Well, thank you very much
for
receiving reassurance. He may or she may not think it's of much street amenity, but I'm sure people living round there do, because it will be very green when it's out. It's quite a mature tree, so it looks good. The other thing is that although I appreciate these townhouses have gone in, they look as if they've had an argument with the other houses in Winnock Road. All the houses around there, the old houses, have straightforward pitched roofs, as we know from all our areas, I think. And they've got hipped roofs. This has got a gable. You know, that is nothing like what next door. If it was just a bit higher, it probably would blend in a bit better, let's put it that way. And there's no attempt to step it down in other developments that we've had, as for example in Swan Road, where we've had higher flat development closer to the High Street end, the Station Road end, more publicly seen end of the High Street. It's there, and then it's stepped down to other development in a more gradual way. This looks visually like a bit of a fight, a bit of a confrontation. Also, although I respect what the planning consultant has said about the effect on the window, 2.7 metres away, you've got ground and first floor window. 2.7 metres away, you have in effect a three-storey building, because the second storey is at the top of the roof level of your neighbours on the other side. So it's only then that it starts to go away. So yes, it does impact on that house adversely. So that wasn't really correct information in my view. And I have concerns about that. I think if there had been a bit more attention to detail about the way they were going to treat those properties, because it's still 4 stories. It was 4 stories before, it's still 4 stories now. And just because they put gables on the front, it's not really, yes, it has changed it, but I mean, it's moving in the right direction, but it hasn't quite got there yet, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm concerned about that. I do respect all the residents' complaints about the height of this other development further down, and I appreciate that it's been reduced and that we are in a position where our local plans and London plan allows this density of development. And so, yes, we're in a transition period, if you like, moving from suburbia to much more urban development, and that is taking a cost. But it shouldn't take a cost on existing residents and their amenity and their environment so closely. Where it's close to the high road, where it's close to Station Road, the shops, the station, everything else, yes, I can see that, we can accept that, and even though residents may not like it, I think they will understand the logic of it. But where it's right next door to them and opposite, I think that poses a problem. And so sadly, I'm afraid, I was thinking at one point that this might be acceptable and I might be able to vote for it. But for those reasons, which I think are fundamental and set a tone for what we may be considering in other future developments in our suburban areas, I feel I will have to vote against it. So I'm sorry about that, but that is my view. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask anybody else to come in on that, just while we're Councillor Dillon.
Well, I'll echo the views of Councillor Duncan. I think the bulk still on Winnock Road is far too great compared to the existing property. So if it was further reduced, I'd be happier. So I really concur those thoughts.
I did, yeah. Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, likewise, I think it's a better scheme than the one it's definitely a better scheme than the one we had previously. There's no doubt about that. But I think my colleague, Councillor Duncan's absolutely right about the houses and in their relationship to the ones they're going to be built next to. They don't look anything like it at all. Those houses, it's already been said, have got a regular pitch, and these have got gables. I mean, it's better, but I think it's just out of character, really. So I'm not keen on that at all. I like some proposals in this development, the parking 1-for-1 and allocated spaces, the motorbike spaces, the electric vehicle charging points, all that sort of stuff is good. But the main crux of it, Chairman, is this. It's this bulk. I know it's been reduced by a story. It was 8 and it's now 7. But I'm afraid I'm not in favour of it still, and I'm afraid I'm going to vote against it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask officers for some comment. Mandip, please, yeah.
If I start with some of the comments you've raised with regard to the design, this is a new development, the area is changing, so this development, whilst it doesn't replicate exactly what's existing on Winnock Road, it provides some form of transition from new to old. It isn't trying, and probably shouldn't try, to have the exact same design as the existing Winnock Road properties. And I think that's the reason why the current proposal takes a greater step towards addressing some of the previous reasons for refusal, which were the design being inappropriate along Winnock Road. And this is more characteristic. And whilst you're noting that it's 4 stories, along the frontage of Winnock Road it is 3 stories, and it's the setback that's a 4th story. Moving on, you also look at the daylight and sunlight. Now, I do have the daylight and sunlight report. I was aware from our last planning committee that it was a significant concern. On to Winnock Road, that property has, based on the BRE guidelines, no loss of light. So based on the calculations that they use, there is no loss of light. So I've specifically highlighted that these are the windows that the applicant has tested using the BRE guidelines, and none of these windows failed where they were primary sole windows serving habitable room. The primary reason for this is that these are 2-story buildings that back right onto their back gardens. This will turn into a single-story level of development, which is why I don't think there is a significant increase, and the BRE guidance is therefore passed for those windows.
And I'll bring you in.
I think the last point that you raised with regard to this being a suburban location, we appreciate that it is a suburban location, but we have to take into account the local plans that we have, the regional plans, and the national plans, which are to optimise development, and this development is optimising the use of the site, and it is therefore in accordance with planning policies.
Thank you. Go on, James.
Just one more point. In terms of the integration with the Winnock Road properties, so actually if you go along Winnock Road, there's pebble dash, there's all sorts of external finishes, but the last group of them have a kind of orange and red bricks. So you can, through the use of materials, seek to integrate. So if members felt that you wanted bricks that assimilated with the nearest properties in Winnock Road, we can do that through the materials condition. There are things that can be done that can integrate those properties with the Winnock Road ones, and that top story is significantly set back, so you need to be cautious when looking at the elevations. So that.
I'll try and find the roof plan, sorry.
So that top story, because you've got a quite narrow road in Winnock Road, dependent on where you're standing, you won't even see that top story. Obviously, in some positions you will, but in quite a lot of views, it's so set back that to give you an idea, it's the entire depth of number 2 Winnock Road is the depth of that the setback. So it will be read as a smaller development. I think some members may be perceiving from those earlier slides.
Yes, thank you very much for that. When Mandip was making the point about the height, it wasn't in relation to the car parking. I do understand that that's going to be more open, and that would be a benefit that the proposal would bring. I was talking about the development next door, which James has just referred to, and although I appreciate that this floor is set back, the one below, which is in effect a 3rd floor, is as high as the roof, would impact on it. I mean, I don't know how they work out these sunlight things, but if I'm in a bedroom window here, which only looked about a metre away, if that, from the end wall, and we did actually go and view it, despite a wardrobe parked in the alleyway that we walked along, but we did manage to see that there was a window very close to that end wall, and if 2.7 metres away you've then got something as high as a roof, I can't see how that could not impact adversely because of the depth, because it's twice the depth of your own property. So if something is coming out a further depth than your own property and it's as high as your roof, of course that's going to have some impact.
I think I'll close that debate there, because at the end of the day, we're not going to win a technical argument on a BRE report. I understand views, but certainly in any appeal situation, the BRE report will be taken as read. So I'll close that one out if I might, because we won't get any further with that. Any other members wish to add some comment? Councillor Yarrow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. I quite understand where Councillor Duncan is coming from, and we did discuss the very issue that she was talking about at the site visit. However, I think we find ourselves in a slightly difficult position in that we've refused this once, and we've laid down our own rules and regulations of what we'd like to see, and it's my understanding that those have been met. And we could see that they had been met looking at the plans on the site visit. So I'm minded to say that we should approve this.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. This is difficult for me, particularly as I'm a Useley councillor and represent the views of residents, and ordinarily would be banging the drum for them. However, I'm sat here as a member of the planning committee, and I can't allow that to cloud my judgment with regards to the application of planning policy and planning law. And I have to translate the concerns and anxieties that have been properly and expressed by residents into a form of objection that would withstand scrutiny by a planning inspector. And on that bit, I find myself a little bit short, to tell you the truth. I have heard from colleagues opposite, and it would be very easy for me to join with them and say no, because that would be the populist way forward. However, I'm going to probably stick my head in a noose here and say that actually I don't think that is going to be in the best interest of residents. I think what we have here is a balanced amendment to a plan that was properly rejected because of its impact on residents and the bulking and the mass. It has been adjusted such that it does meet some of those concerns, particularly with regards to the urban setting. It does manage a transition reasonably well, in my view, down into Winnock Road, and the corner setting is far better. What is at issue are the terraced houses and their relationship transition into a traditional street scene. We've heard that when it comes to impact in terms of light and sunlight and daylight, there is proper studies being made, of which I do not have the expertise or judgment to say they're wrong. And I don't think the planning inspector would uphold my view that they're wrong over and above a consultant's. So I must be bound by that report that says that the impact on them will be less. My concern is if we reject this, the appeal will go ahead. The pressures on planning is very much about build and build upwards. We might not like it, but it is within a stone's throw of the Crossrail station, and it was very clear when that was announced that the intensification of build around Crossrail would happen, and we shouldn't be surprised that it is happening. The policies support that. So for me to be able to turn around and say I dislike it and it should be replaced with terraced housing, unfortunately does not comply with policies, and I would be actually foregoing my role in a planning committee. And so I feel as though I need to apply the policies. I need to move this forward. Generally, I am supportive of it, but there are some issues of detail that I would like to discuss that might require some clarification. But by and large, I believe that to reject this would be a bad move for residents, and therefore, as I say, I'm prepared to put my head in that noose and say that this is, on balance, acceptable.
Your issues of detail, Councillor, because I've got other hands up, so I might as well continue with you.
Okay, these are very pedantic little issues of detail. If you look in the top corner of the development here, this is around the amenity area. You will see steps up from a lower level up to the amenity area and then a footpath, which is immediately adjacent to the boundary treatment of number 2 Winnock Road. I am concerned that either that will mean having to raise the boundary treatment of 2 Winnock Road unnecessarily high to provide security and prevent overlooking. I think that that should be moved. At the very least, I think that we will be then not providing easy access into the back gardens of Winnock Road from within this estate, which is pretty open, Anybody can walk into it and across and through that way. And so I would believe that might be advantageous on the secure by design approach.
Yeah, so there's conditions we can word that say, notwithstanding the submitted plans, a kind of very simple layout change like that can be altered. If you're happy to delegate wording to us, as I say, it would start with the words notwithstanding the submitted plans.
Very, very happy to do that. And also there is the configuration in the elbow of the buildings and the windows and balconies facing each other. The plans are not in sufficient detail for me to grasp how the privacy is being secured here, but that is a concern.
But we can ensure that the design doesn't, that privacy screens, I would have thought, was the answer I always get at this point. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, that was another point that I had concerns about, that in the elbow there is one living room that it appears the window looks across to a bedroom unit. The adjoining unit to that has an angled window, but in this one, if you angle it, in the one previously that it now overlooks, I don't know what that does to the layout. So on quite a small scale here.
I think the problem we've got is almost impossible for us to actually tell with this level of detail,
Yeah.
although we have approved, to be fair, similar arrangements before, and there are always ways of angling windows, privacy screens and so forth to ensure that there is no overlooking.
It's a very, very narrow window area. That's why I'm saying that if you bring that out, you may be angling it against a small wall next door. So it's a detailed design matter, but yeah.
Can I come in again?
You may come in again.
And I'm very happy to be shot down here, because what I'm trying to do is push some boundaries here. Because I know and I understand residents' concerns about the way buildings are just getting taller and taller and taller and encroaching on. And there's been discussion within the media that suggestions are being made that permitted development is given that enables people to just start rising the height of buildings to match the neighbours. My concern is that were that to allow, that would allow all of this to pop upwards right down the street, rippled up. What conditions could we put on that would prevent?
I don't know. I'll ask
an occurrence occurring in the future.
I'll tell you what. I'll give Mr. Roger a couple of minutes to think about that, because that was a left field one on us. I'll take Councillor Morgan because that is current planning.
If we were approving houses, they'd have permitted development rights, but these are flats, so they won't have permitted development rights.
That answers the question.
So that the
so effectively, is the government only saying that flats that?
They've been talking about anybody can extend upwards to about 8 floors or something, which would suggest that flats are within their thinking. It is something that I would wish to try and close the door on if it were possible.
The question is it possible? I don't know. Councillor Morgan, I'll leave the head of planning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I didn't go on the site visit. However, looking at the plans that we have here in front of us, I can see that the major development has been reduced in height. We've lost a level on the main block of flats, and they've tiered the terraced housing. I feel for the residents, because that terraced housing doesn't fit in with the street scene. Unfortunately, if we go down the level of rejecting this proposal and it goes to appeal and we lose the appeal, at the same time we could well lose all the conditions that we actually have set in place on this. Consequently, with a heavy heart, they've met what we've suggested in our refusals the first time. So really, I feel that we don't have any option but to accept this application.
Councillor Higgins?
I have concerns, obviously, with residents, and I really do. And we sit here, all of us do, but I've done this for many years now. I've sat in your chair as well. So, it's changed since I've been there in that chair, is that we could have a go and sort of refuse this, and 9 times out of 10 we might win, we might not. But the planning law is now, and the conditions are so tight on us to do this, and it does. I think what my fellow councillor next to me said. What the concern is that if we do refuse this, the other application is under appeal, and with the current climate, I think residents have got to understand which would you prefer, this one or the first one. And in the current climate, they would get that. And further, going down, God knows what London's going to be like with these other new plans that are coming out from the GLA. So with a heavy heart, and I really appreciate everything everybody said, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to push this forward and go with officer's recommendation with the conditions that have been taken by my fellow colleagues.
Okay, Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. Listening to what people are saying, I'll only be repeating what they said if I cover a lot of the ground, but I can feel for the residents that what they're seeing is another block of flats going next to where we live. Unfortunately, that's the world we're living in at the moment. So I heavy-heartedly and very reluctantly would support the officer's recommendations on this.
I'll take that as a second. Just before I push that to a vote, I've had 2 notes passed to me which broadly say the same things, which is very good with the head of planning and the legal advisor managed without conferring to get the same answer to a puzzle. The suggestion is that we remove future PD rights from it, which may prevent a roof extension upwards, depends how obviously planning policy and government policy is framed, but at least we are trying. And I would ask committee to delegate the head of planning to do that. Let's see what we get. We don't know how the rules may look if they come out, or if they'll come out in that form. So I have a...
May I also make a further suggestion in that to assist development happening as speedily as possible, the conditions that we put on are that we only put on those that are prior to commencement, where they are genuinely necessary to be prior to commencement. A lot of these, it's standard prior to commencement, and there seems to be no reason why the design of the gates, for example, need to happen before we start doing anything on site. It may just assist developers.
Yeah, my only caution, I take your point, and generally I would be in favour of prior to occupation conditions. There are a number of bits of this, like that playground area, that will need a little bit of design work before we do it, and I would like the onus on the developer to get that design work done to officer satisfaction, and there are questions around palettes and colours and all of those sorts of things. So I wouldn't want this racing ahead at one level and then discovering that, well, we haven't quite got time to do it now. So I think I prefer on this one, I take your general point, and generally it is the way I'd prefer to see them. This is contentious, so I think I would be happy to leave it that the developer needs to get the work done. I am proposed and seconded, therefore I'm going to take it forward. All those in favour, please show. 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against, please show. 1, 2, 3. I could have done that a minute ago. That one's passed. Right, I move to the second one of the night. Malt House, 281 Field End Road, Eastcote, or Ruislip.
Thank you.
Somebody's got an interest in this one, possibly. I don't know. There's 4 people remaining in the room, so it's possible they've got excitement about this one.
Thank you, Chair.
Relatively close to where you live.
No, not anymore.
You do know where it is, yeah, I do too. Right, go on.
Item 7 on the agenda is Malt House. So the application site is a corner property at the junction of Field End Road and Sunningdale Avenue. The town centre is located, it might be on the next slide, yep, so you can see just in grey the location of the designated town centre. The application involves demolishing the existing 3-storey office building and replacing it with a 4-storey block of flats facing onto Field End Road. It also includes the erection of a row of 3 2-storey detached dwellings facing onto Sunningdale Avenue. For information, a previous scheme was refused and a subsequent appeal was dismissed. Now, although the inspector disagreed with the use of our reason for refusal regarding car parking, it was dismissed primarily on design grounds, which have been addressed through this application. The inspector did also award costs against the council as a result of the appeal and the reasons for refusal. So we have sought to be robust in the assessment of this current application in order to avoid further costs. If I take you through the plans, this is the existing site plan showing parking to the rear and the main built form along Field End Road, then here along Sunningdale. The existing ground floor plan, the existing first floor plan, and the existing second floor. So you can see from the elevation drawings, it's fairly simple looking office building, and this is the adjoining site. This is the proposed ground floor plan. So the height in general along the Field End Road elevation does not change significantly, it increases marginally, but nothing that would be out of character with over and above what exists already. Sunningdale Avenue, these are 2-storey properties. You can see from here that the building line is seeking to follow through from the adjoining properties. The car parking, I know it's not very clear on the plan pack that you've received, is actually here. So there's 2 spaces here, a couple of spaces here. There is a clearer plan later and a bank of parking, and that serves the entire development. The houses, however, have dedicated parking in the front gardens in the traditional form. The access would remain via Sunningdale Avenue. This is the proposed first floor plan and the proposed second floor plan, so you can see that the houses are 2 storeys with a pitch roof, and the third floor plan with some PV panels proposed at roof level. The one thing I forgot to mention, apologies, is that the amenity area is actually located here. So that's the communal amenity, which serves the flatted development, and each of the 3 units has its own private amenity space. 3 houses have its own amenity space. If I take you through the proposed elevations, this is the corner of the Sunningdale Road, and then the Field End Road elevations here. You can see just about that I mentioned it was marginally taller than the existing property because the existing runs alongside the adjacent site, and this is not that much taller. This is the Sunningdale Avenue view, so this would be the proposed access point into the development and the 3 detached dwellings. The current scheme has responded to the upheld reasons for refusal by reducing the mass of the development, primarily through significant reduction in the bulk of the row of houses. It might be useful if I take you through, so we have some, so this was the car parking plan I referred to earlier, which shows the 18 bays serving the flatted development, the 2 dedicated spaces per house, and an additional accessible bay here. I take you, there are some, so this is the existing property and some photos of the site and its relationship to the existing properties on Sunningdale Avenue. There are some plans, I believe, in this presentation, apologies, of the previously refused scheme. So it was primarily this element here that was considered to be overly bulky, not providing the transition into Sunningdale Avenue that it should. It was primarily, this was the reason for refusal, which was upheld in an appeal. I have gone quite a considerable way in addressing those reasons. It significantly reduces the visual impact of the development on the prominent visual corner of the site at Field End Road and Sunningdale Avenue. The modifications have also been made to the block of flats. This is in consultation with the council's design officer, recessing the ground floor elevation, providing some buffer to the application site and the public realm. The level of parking provided is equivalent to the ratio deemed acceptable by the planning inspector in the appeal. So 18 car parking spaces serve the proposed flats, with 2 dedicated spaces for each of the residential homes. This application is also maintaining a 35% affordable housing provision on site, which is policy compliant, and accordingly the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
What can I say? Really, not a lot. I mean, the only thing is, the sad thing is that building used to have the game designer AE who do FIFA and all that used to work from there. But apart from that, I'll go with officers' recommendations.
Councillor Duncan, Councillor Oswald.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think this scheme just illustrates what I was trying to say about the last scheme. You know, that you've got houses next to houses, it does blend in. It didn't before, and although there's a 4-storey development and there are 2-storey houses, they are on the other side of the road, so they're a distance away and they're not going to be affected by that. And yes, I think it's a good scheme. It's sensitive to its surrounding development in a very acceptable way, so I'm happy to go with it.
Councillor Oswald, have you been took you at the post, or have you got something else?
No, it's okay. It's the design difference between the 3 houses and the one next door. I was a little bit concerned about that. And also, my colleague has just said, why couldn't we have had these houses in the last application?
I've no idea, because they didn't put them in.
It looks so much better. However, that's done and dusted. I was very, very pleased to see that the flatted developments was on Field End roadside, and the houses were into that road there, the name of which I can't remember, but
Sunningdale.
I've walked past it thousands of times, but yeah, Sunningdale. I think it's okay. I think it's a good scheme. I like the design of those houses. Just a shame they don't match up with the one next door. But I'm quite happy to. Has someone seconded it?
I think Councillor Duncan effectively did. All I would say is that in terms of the houses, the key to this one working will be the palette of materials that are used on those houses. And that would be my plea to the developers, please, to get the palette to match up. I accept Field End Road is one palette because that is office blocks primarily, and fair enough, but the other is very suburban and you know, get the palettes to match. And I'm sure officers will robustly make sure they do. Councillor Morgan, I am proposed and seconded, so unless you've got some...
I've got no issues with this application at all. I was just going to ask if it's possible to make sure that permitted development rights are removed on the 3 houses so that they don't encroach further into their very limited recreational space at the back.
Are they there? 23 does it. I thought it did. Go on, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with the comments of the urban design officer. I think those houses are an exceptionally poor example. It's not something I would go with. He or she, on balance, approves it, but subject to conditions that includes detailing. You didn't mention that in your comment. Materials and colour palette, yes, but it also needs to include detailing that makes it sit better with the neighbouring streets. I think that they're an exceptionally poor design myself.
So I think it's detailing and colour is it? Yeah.
As long as detailing is included in the condition.
Just to clarify, so condition 9 refers to revised material strategy. Do you want revised materials and fenestration?
Yes, please. We'll just change it.
I think detailing
is fenestration.
Yes, but well, it might not be that because the urban design officer talks about a lot more detailing.
I think that sends the message. I am proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please clearly show. Thank you. That one's approved. Item 8 is effectively a container or an industrial park, if I can put it in as blunt a terms as that.
Yeah, we ain't got any plans, Chairman. That's probably what, is it?
Probably is why. It replaces it's an effluent treatment plant. There are odour conditions in it. Does anybody want an officer presentation on it? Right.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
You're faster than second. All those in favour, please clearly show. Thank you. That one's done. The last one is one of our own schemes, or the council's own schemes. Clubhouse, Field End, Recreation Grounds, Field End Road. Does anybody else want to understand the detail of this one?
I've seen it loads of times.
Proposed, seconded. All those in favour, please clearly show. Thank you very much indeed. That was very robust for me. Thank you. I'll take 10 minutes.